Hello, Youngevity Nation. It is so good to be with you again. Just came off the road back here at home at the Youngevity office, and it's just really a pleasure to be able to share more new stuff with you and report some of the great things that are happening. I want to precede my remarks with a wonderful Olympic story going back to, I believe, 1954. Okay, I think I have to do this right here. 1954, okay, 1954. Roger Bannister was, of course, in the U.S. track team, and prior to 1954, nobody had ever broken the 4-minute mile. It was impossible, they said. It was physiologically impossible for a human being to run the 4-minute mile. Four-legged critters like greyhounds and horses could do it, but not human beings. Well, Roger Bannister did it in 1954 at the Olympics. He did it in 3 minutes and 59 seconds. It was only 1 second, but he broke it. After that, many people every year have broken it. Okay, now the record is 3 minutes and 43 seconds, and it keeps going down. That's because people know that it can be done, and so they put out every bit of energy they can. They psych themselves up, and they do every muscle fiber in their body to get the maximum performance. Okay, we're talking about epigenetics here, where you're maximizing your genetic potential for speed and strength in this particular event. And so the time keeps going down, where in 1954, everybody knew you couldn't do it. Well, when you look at human health, there's thousands of failed medical theories every century. You've heard me say this many times before. And many of these false theories still remain, but many of these false theories are being exposed as false theories, and the average person says, well, hell, I've been going to 14 experts, I've been going to 3 specialists, and I'm getting worse. I'm on 27 prescription drugs. Things just aren't working. Well, the human being is built, in fact, all vertebrates, let's start there, all vertebrates are built to maintain and repair themselves. Every tissue is meant to repair itself. Even bones can repair itself, even teeth. Enamel is difficult, but the dentine, the softer tissue in the bone, is easily repairable. I've seen people come to me and say, well, the dentine filled up my old cavity, pushed the old fillings out, and now the tooth looks like a tooth. They don't see the fillings anymore. It's amazing what your body can do given the raw materials. There's 2 things you have to do to maximize your genetic potential for maintenance and repair. And that is to eliminate all the bad stuff and to make sure you have an optimal amount of all the good stuff. I mean, it sounds simple, but it's not so simple because many of the medical guidelines, many of the foods in the supermarket are fighting against these truths. So let's look at some of the things. Taking Roger Bannister as example, I believe we can live much longer than the average. I think that the average right now is like 74, 76, depends whose stuff you look at. For a human being in America, women live to be 78, men live to be 72 or 3 on the average. Obviously, some live longer, some live less, but that's the average. Well, when you look at the National Geographic cover stories over the past 50 years, there's many people who live to be 120, 141, 168, and they're still out there in the tea plantations harvesting tea by hand at age 168. And these are National Geographic stories, and they document stuff before they put them on a cover story, right? So I believe that the human being has the capacity to live well beyond 200, even yet today, way past biblical times, right? But I believe the human being has the capacity to live to be well beyond 200 because people who did not know what they were doing, they didn't do anything special, they didn't go out of their way to live to be 200, but they got to be 168. Cover story, National Geographic. So I believe if we consciously eliminate all the bad stuff and eliminate, or at least significantly reduce, free radical exposure, trans fats, heterocyclamines, acrylamides, things like microwave popcorn, theater popcorn. We're looking at olive oil, coconut oil, margarines, mayonnaise, salad dressings, cooking oils, burnt meats, meat cooked well done, processed meats with nitrates and nitrates. All these things got to go. And again, fried foods. And that alone can improve your ability to live longer and healthier. Now you throw in, you guarantee that every known essential nutrient is provided in optimal amounts, or maybe optimal amounts plus 10%. Okay, so you're going to get a little extra, that you can get better. Okay, you can actually prevent diseases and eliminate diseases. Let's look at some of the cover stories in Time magazine over the last, say, 25 years. One of them, of course, was that obesity is now becoming an epidemic disease. Epidemics, of course, is normally used for infectious disease, but when the rate goes up like vertical, you know there's a problem. Well, one of the abstracted articles from a scientific publication in newspapers all across America, and I think it was like 2008, it was a cover story in Time magazine. They said that obesity is an epidemic now. And of course, we became the #1 obese nation in the world at that time. The United States became the #1 obese nation in the world. Now, for 125 years, we have been following the medical theory of obesity in that people who were obese ate too much and didn't exercise enough. And you can go to an inner city or even suburbs of the city, you'll find a fitness center and a gymnasium where you can go in and work out in machines and so forth, 5 or 10 of them per square block. And of course, you can get every kind of weight loss program on TV. You don't have to think. You don't have to count calories. You just eat this meal, and they're going to give you optimal amount of calories, below 1,000, and a tasty meal. And yet we became the #1 obese nation with all these assets, all these various things designed to help us. Well, it turns out that that's a false theory. Being overweight and obese has nothing to do with eating too much or lack of exercise. Being overweight and obese is in fact a nutritional deficiency of a class of nutrients, and any one of those nutrients being deficient will make you gain weight, and if you're deficient in 2 or 3 of them, you'll be obese. And if there's 3 of them, if you're deficient in any one of those, you're going to be the 400-pound, 600-pound, 800-pound person. And you can do all the exercise you want. You can cut your calories down to 500 calories a day, and you'll begin to lose a little bit of weight, but guess what? You'll gain the weight back plus some when you get back up to 1,000 calories, which is about a third of what people eat. It turns out that 70% of our kids over the age of 12 are overweight. 40% of our kids under the age of 12 are obese. It has nothing to do with eating too much and lack of exercise. It's a simple nutritional deficiency. And of course, one of the symptoms of this deficiency is the munchies. We're talking about terrible, terrible cravings. Okay? And this is why Grandma came up with the custom, I guess is the word I'm looking for, came up with a custom when Mom, her daughter, brought her grandkids over, and they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, to the house. She would come out with a tray full of cookies and milk. What a sweet thing for Grandma to do. No, she was protecting her antique furniture with carvings on the arms and the legs, because the kids would lay there on the rug and gnaw on the legs of that antique furniture because they had the munchies. They were driven to eat these things because they were deficient in these specific nutrients. And Grandma found kind of a side ways to do it, and of course that became the roots of our snack food industry, because snack foods will temporarily assuage or decrease these cravings when you eat them, but then an hour later you have the munchies again because you didn't deal with the nutritional deficiency piece. And so this is why we became the #1 obese nation. It was a false theory, and yet doctors still talk about eating less, and they'll give you speed, and they'll give you all kinds of drugs, and of course, again, it's the meals and so forth. No, it's a nutritional problem. And of course, we're very, very happy with Youngevity. We just have the keto diet and the keto bars. I love those things on the road. They're just perfect for me because it's easy to eat a lot of calories on the road. But of course, I've been taking the 90 essential nutrients twice a day for 73 years now. And I'm pretty fit for a guy who's 77 years old. In a couple of months, I'll be 77 years old, using the Chinese aging system. Adding 9 months because the Chinese believe your age starts when you're conceived, not when you're born. And so I'm sort of 2 years away from being 80. And most people think I'm 50. Nobody's going to steal an airplane with me on it. Okay, I can still handle myself. And so the point that I'm making here is, if you give your body the 90 essential nutrients, it will do what it's meant to do, and that is to maintain and repair itself. Okay, I have so many people, thousands of people every month. 1,000 people every month who take the 90 essential nutrients, plus, the secret sauce, we call it, which is now REV, which is the next generation of ASAP, REV, and it accelerates the weight loss. And you can lose a half a pound to 2 pounds a day, and the magic here is you'll never gain the weight back. You'll never gain the weight back as long as you're sticking with the diet, staying away from the free radicals, fried foods, processed meats, oils, and gluten. Stay away from those things. Gluten, wheat, brown, rye, oats, so you can maximize your absorption of the nutrients. You are not what you eat, you are what you absorb. You've got to pay attention to that. Well, that's obesity. Nobody should be obese longer than, say, 60 days, unless they have to lose. I have people come to me, they're 440 pounds. I had one the other day, 585 pounds. and they're already, just in a few days in the program, losing a half a pound to 2 pounds a day. This is very simple stuff, okay? And you won't gain the weight back as long as you stay in the program. Let's see here. Loyola University came out and said that being overweight and obese, again, has nothing to do with exercise. Exercise has nothing to do with it. It's a 10-year study they published in January of 2009 in scientific journals, and everybody who's a scientific weight loss person, exercise physiologist, went to Loyola University and looked at their data and said, that's impossible. Exercise is everything when it comes to weight loss. And they had to admit it had nothing to do with it unless you got your calories down to 500 calories a day. Then that exercise would make you lose weight consistently. You get your calories back up to 1,000 calories, gain the weight back plus. Well, now we know that 8 months later, August of 2009, cover article, Time Magazine, it shows a gal on a treadmill, and it says, the myth about exercise, the cover story, myth about exercise alone will not make you lose weight. So I've been vindicated. Well, let's look at the next one. Type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, even yet today, is thought by most practicing physicians to be a genetically transmitted disease. When in reality, it's a deficiency of a single nutrient. We've known it for 85 years. And one of the great ways to look at this is the Pima Indians. Type 2 diabetes, the Pima Indians. 10% of the Pima Indian population lives above the border with the United States in Arizona. All the adults work in the RV and the motorhome assembly plants, and they're all morbidly obese, and they're all, I should say all, 46% have type 2 diabetes. 46% have type 2 diabetes. And then I don't know how many are pre-diabetic. Now below that border with Arizona and the United States, 90% of the Pima Indian populations occur down in Mexico. And their rate of obesity and diabetes is 6%. Now wait a minute. 6% in Mexico, they have 90% of the population of the Pima Indians, 46% in the United States and Arizona, the Pima Indians, and yet their genetics are exactly the same. Their gene pool was never interrupted by explorers or other Native American populations because nobody wanted to live like the Pima Indians. They lived out in this hard desert in Mexico, and they lived on scorpions and lizards and cactus. Nobody wanted to eat and live like that. And so there was not enough water for livestock. There was not enough water for gardens. So nobody went there. So for thousands of years, they have this uninterrupted gene pool. The same genes in the Pima Indians in Arizona, and the same genes in the Pima Indians in Mexico. Remember, in Arizona, the Pima Indian obesity rate and diabetes rate, type 2 diabetes rate, is 46%. In Mexico, it's 6%. So what's going on here? Well, the Mexican Pima Indians are getting something in their food that the American Arizona Pima Indians are not. The American Pima Indians, the Arizona Pima Indians are deficient in something that is found adequately in the food of the Mexican Pima Indians. Well, what is it? Well, it's more than one thing. It's this special class of nutrients. And that's because the Pima Indians in Arizona live like the Amish in America. Okay, the Pima Indians in, I take that back. The Pima Indians in Mexico live like the Amish, and the Pima Indians in Arizona live like everybody else in America. Okay, and of course this stuff is missing in their food. What is the stuff? Well, let's take a digression here from our course we've been going into and say, well, why is it that obesity, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease is going straight up? Why is there an epidemic of these diseases? Now, fatty liver disease is taking over in the top 3. Okay, fatty liver disease is one of the biggest causes of death in America. Everybody, 30% of Americans are going to be in line for a liver transplant in 10 years. What is going on here? Well, that's because these nutrients are no longer found in our food, not only in America, but also in the industrialized world. We rank 43rd when it comes to longevity. We rank 43rd when it comes to longevity. There's 42 other nations whose peoples live longer than us. And according to the National Geographic, the top 20 longevity cultures, which are all third world cultures except one, which is one of the small religions here found in America, okay, with the exception of that one little group, 19 out of the top 20 longevity cultures are all third world cultures. They have none of the amenities we have. No doctors, no hospitals, no clinics, no health insurance, no indoor utilities or plumbing or anything. I mean, it's like crazy, and yet they have 40 times the 100-year-olds we do. They have 250 100-year-olds per, they have 100-year-old per 250 of the population. We have 100-year-old per 10,000. They have 40 times the 100-year-olds we do. So what's going on here? Well, what's going on is these people who are living longer and healthier in the third world countries have things in their food we no longer have. So what is it? Well, because they don't have any utilities, guess what? Wood is the universal fuel amongst the Pima Indians in Mexico. They're living like the Amish. They don't use electricity or natural gas for fuel. They use wood. And the wood ashes are not really ashes. The wood ashes that remain after burning wood for fuel are minerals that the tree has sucked up out of the ground. That will vary significantly because nutritional minerals, as you know, reading the book Rare Earths and Cures, nutritional minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around across the earth. They occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ripple ice cream. And some places are blessed with 40, 50, 60, 70 minerals. Some places are cheated and they only get 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. Well, plants only require 3 elements from the soil to make good seeds for the next generation. Human beings need 60. So we're 57 short if we're eating a plant that has just the minimum amount of these nutrients that it needs to make good seeds for the next generation. Okay, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are all the plants need from the soil. Everything else they get from the air. Nitrogen and carbon dioxide, okay, is their main things that they use. Everything else, if it's soluble, will be sucked up by the plant. They don't need it, but it'll be sucked up by the plant. Well, when you put these wood ashes, which are 95 to 98% minerals, into the garden like these third world cultures, the plants flourish and grow. We can get 12-pound sweet potatoes if the wood ashes have 60 minerals in them. We can get 12, 15-pound sweet potatoes. Okay? If they only have 3 elements in it, the wood ashes, the sweet potatoes will be quarter-pound sweet potatoes or half-pound sweet potatoes. Big difference. Well, the human being is the same way. Okay? We will flourish taking all 90 essential nutrients because this is what we require to maintain and repair ourselves. All vertebrates, whether you're a fish or a turtle or a hummingbird or a flamingo or a human being or an elephant or a giraffe or a rat or a pig, a guinea pig, a dog, any critter you can name, any vertebrate requires these 90 essential nutrients. You get them in optimal amounts, your body's able to repair itself, maintain itself. You're going to maximize your genetic potential for longevity. And so, because the Pima Indians in Mexico are still using wood for fuel, putting the wood ashes into their gardens, these wood ashes contain the nutrients necessary to prevent and reverse type 2 diabetes and prevent and reverse obesity. What do you think about that? We deal with thousands of people. We deal with thousands of people every day with a supplement program designed to give them all known essential nutrients for vertebrates, including humans. Now, some of you remember that I have a book in the Smithsonian Institute, The Disease of Exotic Animals, and it was essentially my thesis for my postdoctoral fellowship, comparative pathology, which is kind of like a PhD in anything you might get a postdoctoral fellowship in. It's the equivalent of a PhD. And my thesis is a 1,200-page book, The Disease of Exotic Animals, which is found in the Smithsonian Institute. Now, what I learned in doing the autopsies on 17,000 animals of over 454 species of animals and 3,000 humans, and 10 million chemistries and 10 million slides of special stains, looking for pollution as a cause of or contributor to death and sickness from degenerative diseases. What I found out was the universal cause of these degenerative diseases was a deficiency of nutrients. And the same nutrient deficiency led me to this was type 2 diabetes in crocodiles. I'm finding type 2 diabetes in crocodiles that were just brought into the zoo. And did these crocodiles get type 2 diabetes because they ate a Baptist preacher in Africa who was on a mission and got eaten by the crocodiles and they got his genes that way? No. That's not what happened. All vertebrates that have a deficiency, particular deficiency, will get the same disease. That was a universal finding. That's why that book, The Disease of Exotic Animals, is in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure. Because what I learned doing all those autopsies, 454 species of animals and human beings, was that every vertebrate, no matter what it had, fur on it or scales or skin, without any of that stuff, if they were deficient in that nutrient, all vertebrates get the same disease. Nobody had ever thought of that before. Everybody thought type 2 diabetes was a genetic disease. It's not. It's a simple nutritional deficiency. And we began to treat the animals in the zoo with these nutrients, and sure enough, type 2 diabetes went away. Began to try in human beings. And type 2 diabetes, well, they can, let's say it this way, they can slowly wean down off their medication, be medication-free. You call it what you want, right? We do this thousands of times a month. Been doing it for 40 years, commercially, with human beings. And of course, it's very, very exciting. We're talking about obesity, type 2 diabetes, arthritis. In 2002, it said that arthritis is now an epidemic. That was in 2002, cover article in Time magazine again. And that's because the nutrients that are necessary to prevent and reverse arthritis are no longer found in the food. And of course, the doctors always want to do the double knee replacements, the hip replacements. They want to give you all kinds of drugs for pain. And this is why we have so many people who are dying in America now from opioid overdose. It's actually, you're safer going to a street drug dealer and getting drugs from them than you are a doctor. There's so many people being killed by prescription drugs because they overdose, because it doesn't quite completely get rid of the deep pain when you have all this bone degeneration going on. And so it's imperative for people to not only get the 90 essential nutrients, give their bodies what it needs to maximize their genetic potential for maintenance repair, but also we can give them non-narcotic, safe pain relief. You know, you mix, say, 6 to 10 drops of the trauma oil, okay, from aromatherapy oil division, in a teaspoon or a couple teaspoons of CM cream, mix it up real good so it's universally distributed, and apply that to a sore joint, knees, hip, ankles, elbows, neck, back, fingers, toes, and within 15, 20 minutes, you're going to get significant or total pain relief for 3 to 5 hours. Do that 3 times a day, you have a pain-free day. Well, you don't need to be on addictive drugs for pain relief. And so why do doctors do that? Well, you have to come in every month to renew your prescription. So well, that's how we're going to prevent them dying, was we have to come in and examine and make sure that they're not overdosing. Well, that's nonsense. When you look at people like Michael Jackson, he overdosed, been taking his opioid drugs for 40 years. Same way with Prince. He overdosed accidentally because they both had singing recordings the next day, and they'd gotten into some bad stuff. They'd gotten into some gluten. Both of them were gluten intolerant. They had terrible belly pain. They said, oh, I've been taking these drugs forever, so I know them. And so I'll just take a double dose tonight to relieve my pain, so I'll be able to wake up refreshed and be good for the recording. Didn't wake up because they gave themselves an overdose accidentally. It certainly wasn't a conscious effort to commit suicide. They committed accidental suicide by overdosing because they were too complacent. They were familiar with the drugs and didn't feel worried about doubling the dose because they had a belly pain. And so all of this stuff we have going on now is really due to false medical theories. Let's look at cardiovascular disease. Boy, there's a big one. Cardiovascular disease is supposed to be caused by what? Oh yeah, cholesterol and saturated fat. Well, it turns out that cholesterol and saturated fat are essential nutrients. What disease do you get if you're deficient in them? Well, the first thing that happened when doctors started getting people on a cholesterol-restricted diet back in the 40s and 50s to sell a product, because Grandma resisted this new product called Crisco, which was originally designed as a synthetic, smokeless lubricant for diesel engines for German submarines. And after the First World War, they didn't need it anymore, so they sold it to a British soap manufacturer. They couldn't sell the soap because everybody's making their own soap in the 20s, 30s, 40s. And so they sold it to Procter & Gamble, and they couldn't sell the soap because everybody's making their own soap. So in 1952, a guy by the name of Ansel Keys, who was on the board of Procter & Gamble, also on the board of the American Heart Association, brokered a deal by which Procter & Gamble gave the American Heart Association $1.7 million to endorse Crisco as a healthier way to eat and cook than lard, buttercream, and eggs. And Grandma wasn't originally very excited about that. She's following what 20 generations of grandmas had done before her, and she was wanting about to change. So Ansel Keys goes to an advertising firm there in Minnesota and says, well, how do I get people to buy this great product? And he said, well, you got to demonize it. tell them it's going to kill their kids and grandkids and their spouse and mom and dad, and you have to give them the escape. The heaven is going to be this new Crisco stuff. And so Ansel Keys did an analysis of lard, butter, cream, and eggs and found a couple of common denominators in the lard, butter, cream, and eggs, and that was cholesterol and saturated fat. So he started demonizing cholesterol and saturated fat and say, hey, this Crisco doesn't have saturated fat and cholesterol in it. You're going to be safer doing this. Well, they got a little bit of traction, but it wasn't magic. So he goes back to them and says, well, we're getting a little traction here, but we're really not selling it like crazy like we should. How do we do it? Well, you need to really make Crisco like heaven. There's got to be the ultimate place to go for health. And so Ansel Keys spent a month during Lent in 1947, I believe it was, in the Isle of Malta in the Mediterranean, came up with a Mediterranean diet. No science, no studies, nothing. He interviewed, I don't know, maybe 70 people over the age of 75. Some of them in their 80s still harvesting food in the fields. And that's where the Mediterranean diet came from. That's where the Mediterranean diet came from. It was a hoax. It was a fraud. It was designed to sell Crisco. Get over it. Well, it turns out that cholesterol and saturated fat are essential nutrients. And when you're deficient in them, and you're eating egg beaters and egg white omelets, and you've given up red meat and fat and all this kind of stuff, and now you're going to get low T. You're going to get ED, erectile dysfunction. You're going to get menopause at age 30. Why on earth does that happen? Well, that happens because your testicles, your ovaries, and your adrenal glands need cholesterol as a raw material to make a class of hormones called steroid hormones. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, adrenal hormones. Well, the pharmaceutical industry says, we're very stupid. I mean, they're talking about themselves here. We're very stupid. We're telling people for free how to lower their cholesterol. So they came up with a line of drugs called statin drugs to lower your cholesterol. And they were very good. They lower your cholesterol, absolutely. And what did you get for it? Within a year, we got Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a simple nutritional deficiency disease of a single nutrient. Of course, if you're deficient in other nutrients that are cofactors for it, it makes it even worse. Okay, you think about it. Because the entire industrialized world has switched over to the, quote, Mediterranean diet, to the using margarine instead of butter, using things like non-dairy coffee creamers. They're using Crisco and other oils, cooking oils, like corn oil and soy oil and so forth, to cook with. Oh, this one's better than that one. Coconut oil is better than this one. And it increased the death rate from cardiovascular disease, like I don't know how many times. And of course, they've, with this switch over to the statin drugs to lower cholesterol, in the industrialized world, the medical system and their prescriptions have killed more people than the Nazis killed during the Second World War. Okay, that's crazy when you think about that. Okay, now I'm just quoting people. I'm not making that up, I'm quoting people. And so it turns out that cardiovascular disease has nothing to do with cholesterol. Cholesterol is an essential nutrient, and you're going to wind up with Alzheimer's disease if you go on a cholesterol-restricted diet. You get on a statin drug and you really lower your cholesterol down below 200, 180, 140, 160, 110. You are going to get a dementia called Alzheimer's disease. Now, there's 4 other major dementias. You can have them all. You can have 2 or 3 or 4 of them. And usually doctors will actually name Alzheimer's disease as the one they're going to bill for because the insurance pays for more for Alzheimer's disease than it does the other 4 dementias. A double-blind randomized study by a very large university, very well respected, one of the first universities in America, 1783, medical school. They did a double-blind study and just gave a few nutrients to the experimental group of people. It was 5,000 people over 10 years. 2,500 got the supplement program, 2,500 got the dummy pills. All 5,000 people lived in the same valley, they're in the same religion, the same diet. At the end of the 10-year study, and they did this because of my audio cassette tape, Dead Doctors Don't Lie. They wanted to show that I was wrong. What they found out was, even with a limited supplement program with 2 nutrients, which are not the nutrients I'm talking about, just with 2 nutrients, it reduced the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 78% in the experimental group over the control group. Did anybody talk about that? No, everybody says, oh, Alzheimer's disease is a disease, nobody knows what causes it, and it's impossible to reverse it or prevent it. Well, that's nonsense. This double-blind study over a 10-year period with 5,000 people, big university, published in all the neurology journals, shows that you can. Well, I showed it in 1992 with the audio cassette tape, Dead Doctors Don't Lie. I said it then. 1995, when the CD came out, I said it then. Okay? So cardiovascular disease, arthritis, obesity, type 2 diabetes are all diseases which are preventable and reversible. Sounds crazy, but it's true. Now, here's the deal. Remember Roger Bannister. Everybody said that the 4-minute mile couldn't be broken. He did it barely. He got 3 minutes and 59 seconds, but he did it. And after that, we're down to now the record for the 4-minute mile for human beings is 3 minutes and 43 seconds. And so once you know it can be done, people go out of their way to do it, and they can do it, and they can do it, and they can do it. Well, if people not knowing what they're doing can live to be 120, 141, 168, cover stories documented in the National Geographic, if you go out of your way to eliminate the bad stuff and add the good stuff, the odds are you'll be able to add many healthy years to your life. I want to spend time on a couple of more here. All birth defects are caused by nutritional deficiencies of the embryo. I'll repeat that. All birth defects are caused by nutritional deficiencies of the embryo. Of course, there's some exceptions. Drugs like thalidomide, which is a drug, I think it was made in Australia, and it was designed to deal with women's morning sickness when they're pregnant, cause babies to be born without arms and legs. Well, that's toxicology causing that stuff. And of course, the German measles has been shown to cause certain birth defects and so on. And it's one of those things where everything else, really, that's not due to an infectious disease, is not due to a poison coming into the mother in the appropriate time of pregnancy to cause this birth defect. All birth defects, including Down syndromes, are totally preventable. We've eliminated all these birth defects that still plague people in animals. That's one of the reasons why this book, The Disease of Exotic Animals, is in the Smithsonian Institute. One of the big problems in animals in zoos back in the 50s and 40s and 60s when I came back from Africa in 1967 to work with Marlon Perkins with the Center for the Biology of Natural Systems, where I did my 20,000 autopsies, was all the birth defects. We're getting llamas born with cerebral palsy. We're getting foxes born with cleft palate. We're getting crocodiles with type 2 diabetes. We're getting cardiovascular disease in pheasants and monkeys and all kinds of animals. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, how come you're getting cardiovascular disease in these monkeys and these hummingbirds and pheasants when it's supposed to be genetic disease of human beings? Well, that's because they're actually getting terrible sources of free radicals, trans-vascular cycloacrylamides from stored grain. Okay, and that's why we're finding these plugged arteries and everything from llamas and deer and so forth. They're getting coronary artery disease. How did that happen? They're not eating hamburgers. That's because they got these oxidized oils from the stored grains, like wheat germ oil, getting oxidized, turned into trans fats. Tracked it down, got it published. And of course, doctors were sure it was cholesterol, and doctors were sure it was genetic, and so my work got buried until it got reawakened with the Disease of Exotic Animals, and it's in the Smithsonian Institute. Of course, the clinical doctors, there's sort of a fringe group that are believing what I'm saying, and they're beginning to incorporate this for their patients with much blessings for the patient. Well, again, all birth defects, with the exception of ones that are toxicology induced either by prescription drugs or by toxins in the food, these things can cause birth defects. But other than that, all birth defects are caused by nutritional deficiencies in the embryo. We've eliminated every birth defect you can name and 10 times that many you can't name in the animal industry. We've eliminated all birth defects in zoo animals that are fed commercial diets. I mean, I would take duck pellets where we're having swans, babies hatched out of the eggs with spina bifida and their brains hanging out of their heads because they couldn't complete their skulls because they had a folic acid deficiency. Okay? And I brought them these feeds necessary for like feeding ducks. They're going to become Peking duck dinners in Chinese restaurants. Well, you can't give that to our exotic animals. These are exotic animals. They have to have this stuff. They can't have a commercial diet for domestic animals. Well, once I got that happening, Marlon Perkins was very cooperative. We eliminated all birth defects in the zoo animals that still plague people. We've eliminated all birth defects in zoo animals that still plague people because the zoo animals are now getting the farm foods for cattle and sheep and pigs and chickens and turkeys that eliminate by prevention of all these birth defects. Some of them, like muscular dystrophy and cystic fibrosis, are preventable and reversible once the baby's born. Isn't that crazy? Well, let's look at a couple more here. Again, I've talked about Alzheimer's disease, we've talked about cardiovascular disease. Congestive heart failure is a deficiency of a single vitamin. We've known that for 300 years, discovered by a Japanese naval surgeon. Cardiomyopathy heart disease, a sudden death from heart attack. You see this in our athletes here. I don't know, maybe 10,000 kids a year under the age of 20 drop dead suddenly of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease, and doctors throw up their hands and say, oh, we need to start doing EKGs and embryos now, so we can put these babies when they're newborn on the drugs if they have any inkling that they're going to have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease. Well, it's a deficiency of a single nutrient. SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, which is also known as crib death, is caused by deficiency of a single nutrient. The theory for doctors was, oh, they suffocated because they were sleeping on their stomach. They're supposed to be sleeping on their backs. How crazy is this? Okay? And so, it's an amazing thing when you start getting down to the basic truth. Basic truth is usually very, very simple. The false information is usually very complicated, and you have to go to the doctor to get the treatment, right? But I guess the answer to our problems is we have to start being our own doctors here. We have to be our own doctors. And so I urge you to get a hold of what I call the trilogy books, Let's Play Doctor, Let's Play Herbal Doctor, and the Passport Aromatherapy, and learn how to do your own lab tests. You can go to a pharmacy without a prescription, do your own lab test. You can weigh yourself. You can do your own blood pressure. You can take your own pulse. You can do your own blood test, A1C hemoglobin for diabetes. You can do like 8 different diseases from a urine test strip. It's called Polystick, which you can get from a pharmacy. Same way with a colonoscopic exam. You don't have to have some crazy doctor with a mask on, putting a garden hose up your rump and puncture your intestine and killing you, which is probably one of the more common causes of death at the hands of doctors. I think the number 3 cause of death in people, this just came out a couple of months ago. It's a study that was done by Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, not me, Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. A couple of months ago came out. The number 3 cause of death in America is medical mistakes. 251,000 Americans are killed every year by medical mistakes. 251,000. What would happen if a fast food restaurant were to kill 251,000 customers a year? What would, a chain? What would happen to a particular commercial airline if they killed 251,000 passengers a year? What would happen if Iran or North Korea were to send over an intercontinental ballistic missile with some kind of weapon and kill 251,000 Americans? It'd be war. Here's one trade that does that every year in the workplace. Everybody throws up their hands. Well, we don't know how to fix that. Well, you fix it by not going to them. That's why we have Lowe's and Home Depot. That's why we have AutoZone and Pep Boys. Because people got tired of mechanics fixing the leak in the radiator and then causing other problems. They have to keep going back. Or mechanics and carpenters and roofers coming out not doing quite a good job, and they had problems after they thought they were finished. So people say, I want to do this myself. And so it was an entrepreneurial opportunity for people to provide tools and materials to maintain or remodel your home, or to maintain or repair, replace worn out parts in your car, to do it yourself. Well, I urge you to consider doing as much as you can yourself. And here's another reason why. If you're urinating frequently, like 2 or 3 times an hour, just why I just urinated. Why am I urinating now? And you're losing weight despite eating a lot, and you talk to people about it and say, you got the symptoms of type 2 diabetes. You might want to go to the doctor and check that out. If you go to the doctor and your blood sugar is like 160, you got type 2 diabetes, but it's also now in your permanent medical record. Guess what happens to your insurance rates? Your insurance rates, your premiums will triple, your deductible will triple or quadruple. But if you have all those symptoms of type 2 diabetes, you go to the pharmacy and you get just a simple bottle of 5 test strips for $1.50 each. Before breakfast the next morning, you do a fasting blood test. Your blood sugar is 95. You know you don't have type 2 diabetes. But if your blood sugar is maybe 125, 130, you're pre-diabetic. If it's over 140, you're diabetic. You get on a supplement program. You get rid of the bad foods. Guess what? In 2 weeks' time, you test yourself again, and now your blood sugar is 85. Now you're not a diabetic any longer. Guess what? It did not affect your deductible and your insurance, and didn't affect your premium rates. Are you seeing your advantage to doing these things yourself? Plus, the odds are you won't kill yourself. The odds are you won't kill yourself by doing your own testing. You don't need to do a CAT scan or an MRI to see if you have degenerative disc disease. Just stand against the wall with a hard floor, like a bathroom or a kitchen floor, and barefoot. Put your back up against that door jamb. Let somebody hold the pen or the pencil parallel with the floor. Put a dot on that door jamb, like you used to do for kids to show them they're growing. And you go from the floor up to that dot. By golly, I'm 2 inches shorter. I'm a half inch shorter than I was when I was 20 years old. You have degenerative disc disease. You take the supplements, stay away from the bad foods. Your body can maintain, repair itself. That's why we have stem cells. We actually have one of our programs which give the stem cells nutrients they need to get to work instead of hibernating. Okay, you want to look at the immortalium for that sort of thing. We all have stem cells. You don't have to pay $40,000 to have stem cells. We have probiotics. You don't need to go to the hospital where they're going to take their head nurse's bowel movement and put it up into you with a enema and say, okay, now we've given you probiotics, charge you $15,000, $20,000 to have the head nurse's bowel movement put up your rectum. I mean, I think triple treat chocolate is a lot better way to do it to get probiotics than it is to have the doctor's head nurse's bowel movement put up your rectum and spend $40,000 for probiotics and stem cells. And so you got to start thinking about cost, downstream effects of your insurance costs, your premiums, and your deductibles, plus the possibility of injury and death. Think of all the people you've heard of in your church family, your neighborhood, your schools, your family, who've been killed or injured as a side effect of going to see a doctor. Remember, 251,000 are killed each year by medical doctors, just simple medical mistakes. And I'm going to finish up today by saying, let me say one more thing before I finish up. And that is, I get diverted here, I get so excited. But one of the things I want to say is, to prevent all these birth defects, I don't care how many birth defects you've had in your family, or you've read about them in your community, they're not genetic. What you do, you have a couple that's running around together, you get a couple that's getting engaged, you get a couple that's getting married, don't give them a $500 gift certificate. Don't give them towels that are monogrammed with their initials. Do not give them a set of linens to start their household. You get them on the 90 essential nutrients, 16 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fatty acids, both the male and the female, and make sure they're staying away from all the bad stuff, which would include drugs, right? Pharmaceuticals, because there's all kinds of ways to deal with things other than pharmaceuticals. You can do it yourself. It's a lot safer and, in most cases, more efficient, more effective. Because remember, antibiotics will kill bugs. It'll kill bacterial pneumonia, kill bacterial meningitis, kill salmonella, kill syphilis. But antibiotics are the only pharmaceuticals that cure anything. All other pharmaceuticals only treat symptoms. All other pharmaceuticals treat symptoms. If you give your body the raw materials it needs, your body has a system built in within it. It has your own stem cells to rebuild you. That's the secret here. And I just want to remind you, make sure that every one of these people, the young people, are getting the 90 essential nutrients before they're thinking about getting pregnant. And we can end all birth defects like we did in the animal industry. We can do it in the human health. We can eliminate all birth defects. Obviously, we can't protect the nutrition. Drugs, people are using drugs, impact the embryo. People who are getting infected with viruses and things that do affect the embryo. Other than those things, you can prevent all birth defects. I'll throw one more thing, and I keep saying one more thing. I'll keep throwing one more thing. One of the bad things you got to give up is gluten, wheat, barley, rye, and oats, because wheat, barley, rye, and oats cause a contact enteritis and inflammation in your intestines. And that must be new. It must be GMO. What's going on here? No, this happened thousands of years ago when, during the Bible days, farmers switched over from millet to wheat. A millet seed head is only a ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch long. A wheat seed head, barley seed head, oat seed head is 3 inches long. So you quadruple your yield by switching grains you're going to grow on your property. And that's why they switched. Well, the old Egyptian physicians started recording new diseases they've never seen before. These diseases associated with nutritional deficiencies secondary to gluten intolerance are not new things. But diseases like lupus, your doctors will say are autoimmune. They're not. They're due to gluten intolerance and affect your intestines so you can't absorb things. You have lupus for 20 years. You get on a gluten-free diet. Everybody in your family's got to get gluten-free. You take your 90 essential nutrients, and you'll see significant, major, or total improvement. You'll wean off your drugs and go back to a normal life. You have to stay on a gluten-free diet forever. You have to supplement forever. But I mean, I could go on and on and on. I'm talking about thousands of diseases here. They can be prevented and reversed by giving your body what it needs to maintain itself. And so I'm so excited about what we're doing with Youngevity and how we're positively impacting the world. You know, I spoke to the United Nations last year in November for a half hour to a large conference. There were 11 countries involved with sponsoring this conference. They had hundreds and hundreds of people in the audience from all these other countries. You know, the entourage is the various ambassadors. The world is becoming interested in this. We're going into more and more new countries. There's more and more companies wanting to join us in this great mission we have to help our people live longer and healthier. And always remember the Roger Bannister story. The 4-minute mile could not be broken. Well, I believe we can all live to be 200 or more if we eliminate all the bad stuff and consciously, at our proper dose per body weight, take the 90 essential nutrients. I believe we can all live to be well beyond 200. Be 200 chronologically and be 25 to 30 biologically. That's going to be beautiful. I want you to come along with me, not only with the Youngevity Nation, but all human beings all over the earth. We want each and every one of you to participate. And if you're not in a Youngevity position yet, contact your Youngevity associate and join us. God bless each and every one of you. I know He loves you. Thank you very much.